Hi guys, welcome to the Messy Draw podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking about representation in the media. So all things good, ugly and bad. So I think we should start off on a positive note. What do you guys think is some positive representation that we have in the media currently?
You said positive, but this is not so positive. There's something that is meant to be representation but rubs me the wrong way. Using interracial and mixed race families to sell products. Every single advert is one white person and one person of color and they're weird looking children. I'm like tired of it.
Same.
And it's always involves one white person. It's not two
That's
people.
That's what I was saying. Why can't we see like a black husband and an Asian wife? Why does it have to be one person has to be white in this mixed race couple? But
that's the majority. Majority of interracial couples is one white person and someone else.
That's still not all of them. There's loads of representation for a half white, half something else a couple. I think it'd be nice to see just one example of something else.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying you're asking why is it or is that way. I think it's because that's the majority. It's because most interracial couples is one white person and someone else.
Yeah.
That's why.
Can I ask a question based off of that? Because it's majority. One of the tweets I saw in response to the advert in Sainsbury's with the black family, one of the responses was that they were representing 5% of their consumer market. So they weren't representing the majority. This is what I read. How do you guys feel about that?
Is it really 5%?
I think for
one, but according to this tweet, I don't even know if it's a real fact.
We do live in England. The majority is always going to be white people. So if they're not represented, it's always going to be a smaller percentage of people that they represent. If that makes sense. So.
But for once, I agree with the races. Representation matters. Because the way they're getting triggered for not seeing themselves, I'm like, we have been here for how many years?
Like a teachable moment.
Yeah. But it's good to see the tables turn. Like you have been represented in the media since the beginning of time. Now, this is what it's been like for us.
But it doesn't click with them. They don't think, oh, wow, this is how the other side feel. It's just, I feel this anger, look at me. And it's just wild to see it not click for them. But yeah.
I saw this tweet that said Aldi's family are a family of carrots and no one has a problem with them.
But you know what? With that, I feel like if people are going to have a problem if it's majority white, majority Asian, majority black, then I think we should stick to carrots and no, I'm being serious, because then that way no one can feel left out.
But then what sort of message is that? There should be enough, what's the saying? Enough space at the table that we can have one advert with the black family and then the rest are all white people.
But there has been, that's not the only advert. Sainsbury's does this whole family thing. And there's a black family, Asian family, white family, interracial family. There's different families. But this one gained a lot of attraction purely because of racism, really. People saying, oh, they're going to shop somewhere else. Well, be my guest.
When they did the whole Black Lives Matter as well. Sainsbury's has been going through it this year.
You know, but you guys hear that as a backlash to what Sainsbury's have experienced, Tesco cut out a black couple out of their Christmas advert, which I think is absolutely disgusting. Because what did that prove? That you didn't actually care about representation in the first place. You cared about hitting a certain demographic, and now that it's not marketable, you take it out, which makes sense because you are a shop, but at the same time, it's really damaging.
But I've got a question for you, especially Gunchin. Like, Diwali was like last week?
Saturday night, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like if I didn't have you as a friend, or my little brother who's still in school, because in school you always know what's going on. Otherwise, you kind of like have to do your own research to find out about like Diwali or something else. Like, how do you feel like growing up in England when it's not really, you don't see it?
to be honest, we're such a close-knit family and community as an Afghan Sikh that it's celebrated, and I see enough representation in us, in the things we do and the places we go. But I imagine if I was a Sikh and I didn't have such a close-knit family and so much extended family around me, I would probably feel a bit like it's not as big of a deal, because obviously Christmas gets a massive big deal made out of, right? Because loads of stores are taking advantage of making sales then. And I feel like Eid has recently been getting a lot more traction as well now. But I still think Diwali is, it's like it's under, they don't do enough. But I guess I don't know how many Sikhs there are to make up enough of a percentage for it to be something to go for.
But it's not only Sikhs that celebrate Diwali, Hindus celebrate Diwali.
Yeah, sorry, Hindus as well, actually. Sorry, I forget, because we actually celebrate Bandi Chor Divas, but it's given the name of Diwali because it's easier, I guess. But Hindus actually celebrate, they're two different sort of things.
Can we talk about some representation in sort of TV and movies, that sort of thing?
Yeah, you guys go first, because I never really see South Asians. So how do you guys feel about that?
Well, I have a very strong opinion on representation in TV and movie, and that is they're all stereotypical. Raj, Baljeet, that weird little Indian kid in the Disney shows, they're always seen as like these undesirable little nerds, side characters, never a main character. The only sort of positive South Asian I can think of is I don't even know her name, from Jessie. Do you guys know her name?
Jessie.
You know what I'm talking about. There's in half, I don't know if she's half Indian or not, but she's a character, and she's just her as a person. It's not about her character, doesn't revolve around her being Indian and the stereotypes of being Indian. But there's such little representation, it's quite disgusting.
I feel like Netflix has been getting really a lot better with getting shows out there and stuff that have loads of South Asians in it. I watched this one show about, the Mindy Project. I feel like I know she's a controversial person, but I love controversial people. But she, like, her storyline, obviously in this show, doesn't revolve around her being brown or her culture and her tradition. It revolves around a lot more normal, relatable things, and I think that's really nice to see. But at the same time, I feel like they really steered away from talking about her being Indian, like a lot of the time as well. So it's not just always about representation. It's like, it's almost like there's the right balance of representation, and it's really hard to get, where you're not taking away their culture, but you're also not making it the most obvious thing about them.
Yeah,
there was this weird thing that was happening on TV when representing Muslim women in TV shows and movies.
Before you even say it, the fact that they always have to take their hijab off.
The weirdest situations ever, and they were trying to represent, but it was so odd. I'm like, you could have done without the representation. This was not needed, because all they did in trying to represent Muslim women were they portray them in this wrong, like, do you know what I mean, in this not very good light. So sometimes you can represent someone, but you have to make sure that you represent them in a way that is correct and appropriate, without just like putting an Asian person or a Muslim person in there and making their whole identity and the entire character about their race or religion or that factor, and then later on dismantling the whole thing.
Yeah, I think Muslim women get done so dirty in TVs and movies. They're either portrayed as some helpless housewife, or if they're a young person, they want to be free and wild, and this white boy convinces them to take her hijab off, and it's always that, her taking her hijab off. She can't just be a main character with a hijab, she has to take it off for this boy. I hate
you guys have gorgeous locks. I'm like, what if she's bald under there? What about them? But I thought the best representation on TV on Muslim women was Nadia Hussain. And because it wasn't scripted, that woman who won Bake Off. It was honest, it was true, it was a mother, she was a wife, she was British, she so relatable, and that's what they erase when they focus purely on a person's race or religion or this and that. They erase everything else, as Arifa was saying. They need to be relatable, because sometimes your race and your religion and all this are just factors of your life, and there's a lot more to a human being. There's a lot more essence to them, rather than you just placing entire emphasis on just this aspect of their life. And I thought Nadia she did so much for the Asian community. I think as a Black woman, Lupita is an absolute hero of mine.
Yeah, Lupita, love her.
Absolute hero, and everything she stands for, she's unapologetically Black.
And I love the fact that she wears her natural hair. A lot of Black women don't really wear the natural hair. That's why I enjoy people, women like her or Issa Rae or Tracy Ellis Ross wearing their natural hairs to represent other Black women. That, we need to normalize Afro hair, because a lot of us don't really wear it out. So, do you feel like you're represented enough as a dark-skinned woman? No?
We're moving towards a positive direction. We're not there yet, but we're moving there. Do you know this whole Sainsbury's advert thing? And this racist mob mentality is so damaging, and that Tesco retrieving pisses me off. I was reading about all of that, and I read that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, whatever, Willy Wonka, the original books, the little boy was meant to be a Black boy, the main character, but all publishers told, what's his name, Dahl, what's his first name? Well, Dahl, that no one would read the books if the main character was Black. And he answered to this racist mob mentality that they changed it. And it's what do you call it, Tesco's is doing now. For me, yeah, as a Black woman, we are moving to a positive direction. But for Asian women, there is such a long road to go. Yeah. My goodness, rarely see Asian women, not just in TV or scripted, but like TV presenters and radio hosts. You rarely see them.
I think part of that is the Asian community holding their own back. Whenever anyone breaks out to do something, there's always a backlash of, oh, what her family gonna think? Is she bringing shame to her people? That sort of stuff. I see that stuff a lot when I see small creators trying to make it big. Obviously, it's not all that. That's not the main reason. The main reason is that they don't get casted simply because they're not seen as desirable, or that they're not casted for whatever reasons. But that's definitely I think a big factor.
But also, I think creativity and art and things like being a radio presenter, let's say, those are seen as more creative jobs, and I don't think they're heavily encouraged in our community. So although they might not cast Asian radio presenters, there is a much smaller pool of women who are, trained to be radio presenters. Do you see what I mean? Because they're not encouraged to take roles like that. So for lots of Asian women, this is, any of them that are doing these things, it's their first time. They're the first people to step out of their community and do something like that. And like Arifa said, they receive so much backlash. And it's really hard to be the first person.
No, I've noticed as well, there's not many South Asians in the Olympics as well, is there?
No, it's just these sort of things. They're not steady enough. They're not. There's lots of backlash for wanting careers that don't.
Bollywood is like the biggest film industry ever.
Yeah.
And it's really popular. So they do encourage it to some extent, no?
I don't know a lot of brown women, a lot of brown girls who, if they were to say they wanted to become actresses, I don't know a lot of people who would encourage that. It's still
going to be an actress.
Huge.
Bollywood is
huge.
Bollywood
is huge, but to be honest, a lot of people say that Bollywood, I've forgotten the word, but Bollywood is very like, it's all about who you know and your family ties.
I know what you mean though. A lot of the actors and actresses from this generation, their mum and dad were actors and actresses, and so forth and so forth.
Or they have connections.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, so with our generation, and when we have children, like our generation, there will be more Asian representation because there won't be as much of a restrictions on people wanting to pursue career in television and in creativity and things like that? Because now we said, yes, the media, of course, has something to do with it, but also the families have a lot to do with it. So do you think in about, let's say, 10 years or so, things could change and we'll see a lot more Asian people on TV?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. I just think as time goes forward, everything's getting more progressive.
Yeah. And the reason why, the reason why white people are so represented is because there's more of them doing these things. And now there's more Black people doing these things. And now following suit, I think there'll be more brown people doing these things. But we're all in our own, we're all evolving. And I think for my community, I only speak for Afghan Sikhs, but if in my community, we immigrated a very long time after a lot of people immigrated. We immigrated in the 90s. So for us, we're evolving at our own pace, probably at the same pace that a lot of other communities evolved at, but we're still back in time, And I feel like a lot of communities are like that. They're still evolving at the same pace that other communities did, but they have not had as much time to do so. So in 10 years, definitely, you'll see more Asian people doing things like that.
I'm currently watching Girlfriends on Netflix. And it's about 4 Black women navigating. They're Americans, that's not much to relate to, but the fact that they are 4 Black women navigating their late 20s to their early 30s and life and dating and things like that. And I remember Friends being on TV years and years ago, and my cousins watching it. I was too young to really understand what was going on. But now I'm like, okay, there were fashion icons, there were people who were looking up to them, and white people had friends. There's yet to be a TV show about Asian women navigating life to kind of give Asian girls someone to look up to. So, and do you think of course we need a show about Asian women that doesn't revolve around their race and them being the only one Asian friend?
What do you mean on British television? Then there's it to be an Asian.
What do you think that would do for the Asian community? Let's say 4 Asian women TV show about life, dating, work, etc.
I think it would empower so many Asian girls to kind of embrace the lifestyle that they want. I think sometimes they're so scared to do that, but like, look, mum, dad, this is on TV. This is what lots of other Asian girls are doing. I think it's really positive.
But you know what? Although British television might not be embracing that sort of thing, Prime and Netflix really is. There are a lot of shows on Prime and Netflix that are very modern type of shows. They're not like typical family orientated, I guess. Some of them are, but they're really embracing it. There is a show on Prime, Amazon Prime, called 4 More Shots that people love. And it's about 4 girls, 4 working girls, their boyfriends, their lives. It's super cool. And then like Netflix is commissioning its own shows. Like I think Lust Stories was one of them, and it's about 4 women, Asian women, who like have their own sexual like desires and their own sexual adventures. And one of them is like a 55-year-old old woman, and it shows how her family shame her when they find her erotic books stories that she reads, and they throw her out of the house. So it explores different types of sexuality. So it is really changing, I think, but I don't think TV embraces it the way.
Do you know what I'd like to see? A program about Asian women that doesn't revolve around marriage.
Every single one I've seen is about marriage. It's about her convincing her parents, like, this man is from Pakistan, I'm Indian, we're meant to be together, please let him be my husband. It's never anything else. Never anything. They make you guys look so desperate for marriage. It's like there's more to Asian women than
all about finding a husband. Honestly, I'm like tired, and they're doing nothing but furthering this horrible stereotypes, and also stopping women from advancing in their lives, because all you have to do is find a husband. We can't talk about representation, especially for Black people, without talking about Beyonce. And I know people say, no, Beyonce doesn't represent. I feel represented by Beyonce. I am excited, and honestly, well and truly excited to have Black daughters, so that they won't grow up in such a rigid world that I did. And when Brown Skin Girl, the music video came out, she could have just chosen Black women, and because she's a Black woman, she could have just represented Black women, but she went above and beyond to include South Asian women who are often overlooked, especially dark-skinned South Asian women. They're overlooked in even Bollywood.
Yeah.
And for me, that was representation at its core.
It really did happen.
There was so much backlash for Beyonce including South Asian women.
Beyonce went above and beyond to include dark-skinned Asian women. And then later on, there was that song about saying this woman is better looking than Beyonce because she's lighter than Beyonce. And obviously that's going to piss off a lot of Black people, saying this is why we don't believe in people of color, because they see us as less than as well. Like we're in this same boat, but they still see us as less than because we're darker than them. So
I mean, it's not a lie. It's the Asian people majority.
No, it's not a lie at all.
Less men.
So much racism in it.
Najma, do you believe in people of color?
A little bit more than the term BAME, because that one, oh my God, rubs me the wrong way. I think Black people, and I think that's a good thing about us as a race, we fight everyone's war. Especially Black women. It's Black women fight everyone's fight. And no one is walked all over like a Black woman. We are there beating our chest for everyone. But when it comes time to help us, everyone is backing out. Yeah. So in that sense, no, I don't believe in people of color. I think when you say people of color and you include Black people, the things that were created for Black people because we are underrepresented, even in the job market, we're underrepresented. But then and companies are using quotas to get people of color, and they get one Black person and 20 Asians. It is not representation. And I don't.
It's almost not a slap in the face, I really think. It doesn't sit well with me either. We're not fighting the same fight as other as other people of color anyway.
So do you think there should be more division in the way they're represented?
We are different, so there should be division. We're not the same. And that is not a criticism or negative or anything. It's South Asians, East Asians, Africans, white people, we are different. So putting us all in one category is kind of really
taking away our own identities, I think.
Yeah, it's taking a shortcut, and he's saying all of you are minorities, there you go, instead of acknowledging each race and community on their own.
Yeah, I remember when, is it called Crazy Rich Asians or something like that? And all the Asians on Twitter were like, oh, you guys, pulled out and showed out for Black Panther, you guys better do the same for us. And it's like, that's not how it works. These should be two separate conversations. It should be, I hope this film does well, not you owe us this because we went and saw your film. I think stuff like that really does separate.
I don't believe in it because it's always said stuff like, oh yeah, you lot are shouting about Black Lives Matter, but I don't see the same energy for Muslims in China or what's going on in whatever country.
I despise those tweets. Oh, they're talking about Yamal, but they're not talking about Palestine, la la la. We can have two separate conversations about two different things.
When Black Panther came out, right, it was a monumental moment for Black people.
Yeah.
We had a Black superhero with a Black love interest. It was amazing. And I used to see it on a daily basis saying, where is the Asian superhero? I'm like, there have been 100 white superheroes. Never heard you say a peep. But now Come on now.
Yeah.
It's like they always wait until Black people are having the moment to be like, oh, we're not being represented as well. It's like you've had all this time.
Why do you speak up before?
Yeah, speak up. But
I believe there should be an Asian superhero. I believe there should be more Asian films. I love Crazy Rich Asians. I would 100% pay to see all of those things. I will support. But I find it a bit convenient that when Black people get something, now you're making noise. You are making noise when white people were. The people who are standing on all of our heads, by the way.
Yeah. I do think other minorities tend to piggyback on the success of Black people making strides in getting what they want, even if it's representation in media or what have you. After Black people get that, it's all about me now.
We've been fighting longer.
Yeah.
Black people have been getting massacred in this country longer. And I get it, yes, Muslim people are getting killed in China. The Rohingya, what do you call it, in Burma. I would stand by those and I will fight those wars. But it's not one or the other.
Honestly, we can honestly raise awareness for everything at once.
I think once we start nitpicking, things can get out of hand. And British actors, whether they're Black, white, Asian, they generally are better.
I agree.
Americans are waiters and decide one day they will go to Hollywood. Whereas British actors from the early age, they train to become actors. They're trained in many different ways. And
so do you believe a transgender or a gay person or a lesbian, they should hire them to play those roles?
Yes.
Tread carefully.
No. No, I want to say yes, because not that acting at the end of the day is to act, to pretend something you're not, right? That's what acting is. However, there are not enough gay people or trans people in Hollywood. If there were trans people playing straight people, gay people playing straight people, all of that would have been fine. But because there's not enough, and the roles are very few and far in between, then yes. But if there were like loads of gay and transgender and let's say non-hetero roles going around, and there were a lot more non-hetero actors that could play anything, then for me that would be not a problem. Anyone can act anything. But because there are not many non-hetero actors to begin with and not many non-hetero roles, they shouldn't be taken away. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
It does. It's
100%.
about numbers and about if they can play them, then we should be able to play them. Because if someone was to say, okay, well, someone who's not lesbian should be able to act as someone who's lesbian, then a lot of people who are lesbians will turn around and say, well, women can play men then, and men can play women if we're starting to mix sexualities, if you know what I mean.
You do have like what's his name, Barney from How I Met Your Mother.
Sorry?
Like Barney from How I Met Your Mother, he's gay and he played a very straight role for the entire duration. So I think
there's a lot of straight people who gay people who play straight roles, but I think it becomes a problem when the majority takes away from the minority.
Yeah.
Because there's only a few gay men pretending to be straight.
Yeah.
And when gay men are not even being hired to play gay people.
Yeah.
I think authenticity matters.
No, I was watching West Side Story and I googled the cast and oh my goodness, all of them were practically white. It was meant to be white gangsters versus Latino gangsters, and I was like, these accents are not hitting it for me. And then when you Google it, it's like he's from Russia, she's from Greece. The girl who played Maria is not even Latina. I was like, wow.
It becomes a problem when like white straight people take roles that were meant for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is if you guys know this, but you know Twilight, the wolves, because they were from like I think they're from a native tribe or whatnot. I think every single person that played part of the wolf pack, I'm not sure what they're called, they all had to prove their ancestry as like show they had actual native ancestry. But Taylor Lautner is actually all white. He is completely white. There's no ethnic in him. How wild is that?
Why is he all brown? Like, is he just really fake tanned?
I don't know, but I saw a picture of him with
He
his mum
really doesn't look
and
white,
siblings.
you know?
I thought he was Native American.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it.
I think his mum got it from the
All
milkman.
his parents look really white. So
But I think it's interesting that they made that exception for him when everyone else has to prove their ancestry. I bet there was a very good-looking, nice native actor that could have played the role of the wolf.
But what's his name? Johnny Depp played a big historical character in Lone Ranger, like historical Native American, and Johnny Depp is as white as they go.
Angelina Jolie.
Like
Angelina Jolie playing a biracial woman.
Yeah. What was that Egyptian film? Was it Exodus or something? And like the whole cast was white.
Oh yeah, the Christian Bale and that Scottish man. What's his name?
No, but
the Hollywood is actually taking the piss.
Were you a lot offended by the Jasmine woman?
I personally was, because like she was a half white, half Indian woman, and she's very fair. And when you look at the cartoons of Jasmine, she's not dark skinned, but she's brown at the very least. They could have hired someone that looks similar in skin tone. And I know it seems a bit like I'm nitpicking, but there's such a representation for brown girls. The fact that they hired such a light skinned woman, I think it just ruined it for me. Because I grew up looking at her.
Aladdin was played by an Arab boy, was he? Wasn't he Indian, the boy who played Aladdin?
No, I think he had some Arab background in him.
Oh, never mind.
It's just like, it comes down to authenticity. If everything is whitewashed, so it's representation, but it's just enough representation, you know? Because they might be like Jasmine, she's a lot more brown she's represented as a lot more brown than she is in there. And you know, to them it's not about actually bringing brown people in. It's about just hitting their quota. It's got to be someone brown, half brown, half like is right. They don't care about actually representing.
No, Hollywood hates dark-skinned women. I mean, just look at it. Every Black family, all the women seem to be very light-skinned, where all the men are dark-skinned. I don't know what biology that they're going by.
But Najma, to your point, my family, as you've said before, we're like the rainbow, like we come in different shades. And I know a lot of Black families like that as well. So it is a problem, because it's always the light-skinned women that are light.
Convenient. All the women are light-skinned and all the men are dark-skinned.
Yeah, that is the problem. But Black people
and femininity to do with skin color.
And the aura is not even light skin. It's not me. It's mixed race.
Yeah, exactly. You are a light-skinned Black woman. All the women are like half white, and all the men are full black. And somehow this is our family.
There's Zendaya's. Zendaya with a Black man and a light-skinned Black woman.
Yeah. You rarely see a dark-skinned woman in a feminine light, unless they are casting for slavery films. It's ridiculous. And I think light-skinned women, whether they're mixed race, in America, if you're mixed race, whether you are, you're Black, if you have an ounce of Black in you, those Black women, I think, need to look within and say, actually, are we taking jobs from dark-skinned women? Are we furthering this horrible, damaging stereotype?
You know what you just said earlier about how lighter-skinned Black women should think before they take a job and say, am I taking this away from a Black woman who needs to be, whatever this role is representing? I think that's a big thing. I think we are obviously Hollywood, Bollywood, and all these communities, they do what they need to do, but at the same time, we should demand more of them, and we should hype the women that do these things more, So when brown women do things like become radio presenters and do more creative fields, we need to hype them up more, and we need to give them more recognition and more awareness, because if they don't get that awareness, they're not going to get anywhere. So I think we as a community have to do more as well, so that people that need to get representation. We need to push them so they do get, you know, out there.
Last topic I want to bring up, just because it's another form of media, books. What do you guys think about representation in books? I personally used to read so many books as a kid that I'd max out my own library card and have to use my mum. That's how many books I read, it like I'd borrow at a time. And I kid you not, I never read about a brown person ever.
I think
and even the ones that were not brown or their race wasn't explicitly shared in the book, it was assumed they were white.
Yeah.
Color just wasn't something they mentioned. But I think Harry Potter was my first book where I read about brown people.
Yeah, same.
The twins. And then I think The Secret Garden was the first book that had, no, it wasn't the first, but wasn't it the first book that referred to Black people?
I was gonna say my most heartbreaking book moment was I was obsessed with the Hunger Games. I read the books, each book in a day. And even though a race isn't technically mentioned, they described Katniss as having, you know, olive skin, brown eyes, blah, blah, blah. And when it came to making the film, they hired a white girl. It was so heartbreaking. And the thing is, an olive skin girl was the most representation that I could find in a book. So I clung to that. And then watching become a movie and seeing a white girl in the role, I never watched the film. I couldn't bring myself to do it.
I am currently making a conscious decision to read non-white writers.
I've got a list.
Because somehow, when you were younger, the books written for 16, 17-year-olds, those fantasy, sci-fi books, were all written by either white men or white women. Everything was about, really, it wasn't even a thing that I thought of. For me, it was a book that I liked, everyone was reading it, I read it, I enjoyed it, end of. And only now I realized just how much I was missing out. Now I am currently reading this book called, it's an old book called Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Amazing book, recommend it 100%. And it's about, he's an Indian man, so he writes about his Indian culture, and the book's about, it's a sci-fi, well, it's a science fiction, sci-fi, where these children have, what do you call it, superpowers. Anyways, he writes about his grandfather, and he talks about his grandfather praying, and he talks about the prayer mat and things like that. And it was just the little things that went a long way for me. The things that I never really, I'm like, oh my God, that I can relate.
That's why that Afghan book, I always forget what it's called. It's one of my favorite books because it takes you into a different world.
What do you call it?
Thousand Splendid Suns. That, something like.
Honestly, when you're reading it, you're like in a different world. And it's amazing.
My absolute goal in life is to write a fantasy book where the main characters are dark-skinned Asian women and Black women and, you know, ethnic people in general, because I've never read about a brown fairy or a black mermaid or anything like that. And I think little girls deserve to read books and see themselves in these magical universes, because that's my favorite genre, and I've never seen myself in that. That's my ultimate goal.
I think I did. Honestly, I feel like growing up we had Black girls in the children books.
I live in an all-white environment, so maybe the stuff that we had where I lived was a little bit different.
No, but I don't think it's about where you lived as. I mean, I'm sure it played a part, because I mean, I think we all lived in predominantly white areas. But like, not saying that your parents did not make an effort to go out and buy books that you could relate to. But I had like a black doll. I had the things that I used to see. Honestly, growing up, I saw a lot of black. As not many Black people say this, but I had a black doll. I saw a lot of Black people on TV, and the books as well.
Never had
definitely growing up, I did not feel like I was not being represented personally.
Well, that's fair enough. I personally, like I said, I used to read so many books as a teenager. My favorite genre is fantasy, and I never read about a brown fairy or, you know, brown elks and stuff like that. That's what I want to give to people.
There's this book, right? It's called I just looked it up now because I forgot what it's called. It's called Stories for South Asian Supergirls, and it's written by this woman called Raj Kaur, and it's for like kids, and it's like talks about 50 notable South Asian women through history, including Neelam KG, you know, the girl that was recognized mainly for the Burberry campaign she did, and then Mindy Kaling as well. And they're really cute stories. So I think stuff like that is really important to be able to see that from kids, because we didn't have as much representation.
Happy stories are key.
Happy stories.
I think as a parent, though, of a minority child, they are there. They're not going to be at the front. You have to like search for it.
Yeah,
they are there because I
think, yeah, we have to place some blame on, I think, our family as well for making sure that we didn't feel excluded, that it was their responsibility. Yes, society's responsibility to make every child feel included, but our family should take somewhat responsibility.
As a parent, you should go out.
Yeah. If I have daughters, I will make it my mission to make sure they feel included. They read books about people who look like them. They see TV about people who look like them in a good light and not just traumatic light as well. I would make it my mission.
Yeah,
and I think but our parents dropped the ball in that sense because they didn't realize just how important it was, and because they themselves couldn't relate, I suppose, because we can relate and we don't want to subject that pain to our children. Their pain was different.
Do you know, growing up, guys, did you like for instance, like I remember Bratz, like Sasha was my favorite hands down, just because she was black. Like, did you guys cling on to, or Arifa said she clinged onto that Asian person in that book. Did you guys cling onto that person that you could relate to? Like girl groups, the black person was always my favorite.
Kelly Rowland. I know everyone liked, what's her name, Beyonce in Destiny's Child. I get it. But for me, Kelly Rowland was my girl because she was just, I don't know, she was the darkest. I think Michelle was back, but Kelly, I think, was the darkest. And
yeah. I used to be really, I still am to this day, I'm really obsessed with Bollywood movies. So for me, that was just like, I just loved it. I loved it so much. And that was me. And also, you know what? You know, in Tracy Beaker, you know that?
Justine?
The girl, Justine, she looked not white. So for me, I really liked her as well. Even though she was like this horrible person and she was like the enemy of Tracy, I just really liked her just because she was someone that wasn't white.
Yeah. And that's the case for a lot of people. You have to like, even if they're not even that much of a likable character, because you can relate to them appearance wise, that's your favorite character. Which is really bad.
There you go. I think representation in whether it's skin color, religion, gender, body weight, or even skin conditions, things like that. I think seeing people who look like you and that you don't feel like odd one out is so important in growing up.
Age as well, especially for women.
Yeah.
Older women
need to be represented.
So guys, that was our episode on representation in the media. I hope you've enjoyed it. What we're going to do for you is we're going to suggest some authors and books by people of ethnic minorities, and we'll put that in an Instagram post for you guys, and hopefully that'll kind of show you a little bit of representation. And yeah, that's been an episode. Stay messy, guys.
Stay messy. Bye.
Bye.